Dear all viewers, you are listening the Alpa's King love story. In that story, you will enjoy a lot of thrilled, love, and more interesting ending. Before starting story, please subscribe my channel because your one like and subscribe means a lot to me. And after it, please share your thoughts on comments. And if you like the story, so share it with your circle as well. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Shattered Vow. The laughter in the great hall was a living, breathing thing. It swelled against the vaulted stone ceilings, a wave of joyous sound that felt like a physical assault. Each burst of mirth, each clink of a celebratory goblet was a tiny, sharp dagger against my skin. I pressed myself deeper into the cold shadows of an alcove, the rough stone biting through the thin silk of my dress. My only wish, my only prayer in that moment was to dissolve, to fade into the mortar between the stones and vanish from this nightmare. Because this feast of light and music, it was supposed to be my night, my beginning. My eyes, traitors that they were, kept drifting back to the high table, to Ronan. His smile was bright and easy, the same smile that had once been reserved for me. Now it shone for my sister, Isolde. She was a vision in moonlight white silk, her golden hair cascading like a waterfall. She glowed, and Ronan's gaze upon her was one of pure, public devotion. They looked like a painting of the perfect couple, a beautiful, agonizing lie that had cost me everything. A heavy, cold stone of despair sat in my chest, making it difficult to draw breath. All the promises, the whispered vows by the willow trees, the secret plans, the certainty that I would one day stand by his side as his beta female, they were all just ashes now, scattered to the wind the very moment Isolde had decided she wanted him. Isolde, who had everything, beauty, grace, our parents' favor, simply had to possess my one singular hope. Just breathe, Elara. Do not let them see you break. Do not give them the satisfaction. But the tears came anyway. They were hot and shameful, tracing silent paths down my cheeks, catching on the dusting of freckles that I always hated. The chill from the wall was the only real thing, a sharp anchor against the fire of humiliation burning through my veins. I could feel the weight of the pack's gaze, their pity a tangible, smothering blanket. I was the spectacle, the rejected one, the girl not chosen. The shame curdled, turning into something darker, hotter. I dragged my gaze away from the happy tableau, forcing it upward, to the very apex of the hall, to the throne that sat above all others. The Alpha King Kaelen Blackwood sat there alone. He was a figure carved from winter itself, broad shoulders under a dark fur-trimmed cloak, a face of sharp, unforgiving angles, and eyes that held the distant chill of a glacial lake. He was not watching the celebration. He seemed to observe it as one might observe a mildly interesting swarm of insects, a sovereign of silent, frozen power, utterly, terrifyingly detached. And then, it happened. In the space between one ragged heartbeat and the next, his gaze, those ancient, piercing eyes, swept across the room. They passed over the laughing crowd, over Ronan and Isolde, and landed directly on me, cowering in my dark corner. The time stopped. There was no pity in that look, no curiosity. It was the gaze of a predator who has just spotted something unexpected in its territory. A deep, primal terror, one I had never felt before, locked my breath in my lungs. My wolf, a timid, cowering creature inside me, whimpered and tried to hide. This night, my ruined life, was not over. Something in that king's look told me it was about to become infinitely more dangerous. From his throne, Kaelen Blackwood endured the pageantry. The mating ceremony of a minor beta heir was a political trifle, a duty to be observed and forgotten. For 10 long years, his world had been a landscape of numb silence. The great wolf within him, the roaring engine of his soul, had fallen mute after the tragedy that forged his crown. He was grateful for the silence. Emotion was a flaw, feeling was a crack in the armor. He had learned that lesson in fire and blood. His disinterested gaze skimmed the crowd. Ronan is old, a smart, ambitious match. He noted it and felt nothing. His eyes moved on, over faces blurred with wine and merriment, until they snagged on a splash of shadow and sorrow in an alcove, a lone wolf-she droning in grief. The scent of it, sweet, bitter heartbreak, drifted to him an annoying distraction in his sterile world. He prepared to look away, to dismiss this display of messy, useless feeling. Then, a tremor. Deep within his chest, in a place that had been dead and barren for a decade, something stirred. It was not a thought, it was a sensation, a low subterranean rumble that vibrated in the marrow of his bones. It was so foreign, so violently unwelcome, that his hand clenched on the arm of his obsidian throne, his knuckles bleaching white. Annoyance flared into something sharper. He looked at the girl again, at the single tear catching the torchlight on her cheek, and the rumble became a growl, a possessive, primal sound that coiled in the pit of his stomach. A fissure had just cracked open in the perpetual ice of his soul, and it was pointing, like a compass needle, directly at her. A familiar, cloying scent of jasmine and vanilla choked the air. Around me, a shadow fell across my hiding place. "Little sister," Isolde's voice was syrup-sweet, but I knew it was poisoned. "There you are, little sister. We were so worried. You vanished." She stood there, radiant and triumphant, with Ronan hovering just behind her like a guilty shadow. He refused to meet my eyes. Of course he refused. "It's a beautiful ceremony, isn't it?" Isolde continued, her smile a knife wrapped in silk. "I know this must be difficult for you, but some bonds, Elara, they're destined for more, for greatness." She laid a possessive hand on Ronan's arm, "and some, well, some are simply not meant to be." Each word was a precisely placed puncture. My only goal was to survive this moment without shattering at her feet. I lifted my chin, my voice thin and strained. "I am happy for you both." Isolde's smile widened, a masterpiece of condescending pity. "Of course you are. It's for the best, truly. Ronan needs a mate who's not afraid to stand in the sun." She leaned in, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper meant for my ears alone. "Don't fret. Perhaps one of the border guards will find a use for you. You just need to learn your place, here in the shadows." That was it, the final devastating blow. The last shred of my composure crumbled to dust. Another tear, this one of pure, scalding rage and defeat, escaped. And in the dim light, I saw the brilliant flash of victory in Isolde's eyes. She had won. But then her expression changed. The triumph froze. Her eyes widened, first in confusion, then in a dawning flicker of what looked unmistakably like fear. Without any sound, the very atmosphere in the great hall changed. It grew heavy, thick, cold. The raucous noise of the feast dimmed to a muffled buzz, as if someone had dropped a glass bell over the entire world. Dragged by an invisible string, I turned. The Alpha King was no longer on his throne. He was descending the steps of the dais. Each footfall was slow, deliberate, echoing in the sudden, breathless silence. And he was walking straight toward me. The internal rumble within Kaelen became a deafening roar. 10 years of silence, 10 years of absolute control, annihilated in a single catastrophic heartbeat. His wolf was not just awake, it was enraged, and it was demanding. Its command was a single, undeniable word that echoed through the hollows of his being. Mine. His mind, the mind of a king, screamed at him to stop, to turn around, to sit down. This was insanity. A sovereign did not act on animal impulse, but his body was no longer his to command. He felt the shocked stares, the confusion, but they were irrelevant. The only reality was the girl in the shadows and the ancient, undeniable claim that now owned him. He stopped before me, this small, broken she-wolf with tear-streaked cheeks. He loomed over me, and I could smell the cold, clean scent of winter pine and power that clung to him. I could smell my own fear. The world waited, suspended. He leaned down slightly. His voice, when he spoke, was not the cold, formal tone of a king. It was a low, guttural rumble, the voice of the beast he had long denied. "You are not unchosen." The words were not a question, they were a verdict, a vow, a seismic decree that shook the very foundations of the hall. "You are mine." The silence that followed was absolute, profound, a living entity of its own world. The monster was awake, and it had just claimed its mate. In that terrible, quiet moment, a single question echoed in the heart of both the king and the stolen girl. Had he just saved me, or had he doomed us both? Chapter 2. The Gilded Cage of Stone. The silence didn't break, it exploded. A cacophony of gasps, shouts, and disbelieving murmurs crashed over me, but they sounded distant, muffled, as if I were hearing them from deep underwater. The Alpha King's words, "You are mine," echoed in my skull, a thunderclap that drowned out all other sound. My gaze was locked on Kaelen's face, on those glacial eyes that now held a terrifying, possessive fire. I saw Isolde's face from the corner of my vision, twisted with a fury so pure it seemed to crack the air. Ronan looked as if he'd been physically struck, all color drained from him, but they were just blurs. The only thing in sharp, horrifying focus was the king. He did not wait for my response. He did not seem to require one. His claim was a law written in stone, effective immediately. Before my reeling mind could form a single coherent thought, protest, plea, or scream, his hand closed around mine. His touch was not gentle, it was firm, inescapable, a brand of ownership. A jolt, not of pain, but of raw, untamed energy shot up my arm, resonating with a dormant part of my soul. My own wolf, which had been cowering in despair, twitched. It didn't rise, but it listened. "Come." The single word was a low command, a vibration I felt in my bones. It permitted no argument. My body moved on an instinct I didn't recognize, my feet stumbling as he turned and pulled me with him. The crowd parted like a frightened sea before a shark, their faces a whirl of shock, fear, and simmering anger. Whispers hissed in our wake, sharp as blades. The king has lost his mind. A nobody, a rejected beta's cast-off. This will mean war. I kept my eyes fixed on the broad, dark expanse of his cloak, using him as a shield. I was a leaf in a hurricane, my destiny ripped from my grasp for the second time that night. But this was a different kind of terror. Ronan's rejection had broken my heart. Kaelen Blackwood's claim threatened to obliterate my entire world. We did not stop. We moved through grand, echoing corridors, past gawking servants and stone-faced royal guards who snapped to attention, their eyes carefully averted. The air grew colder, sharper, the further we moved from the heart of the stronghold. The torches cast long, dancing shadows that seemed to reach for me with skeletal fingers. He was leading me away from everything I had ever known, and he had not spoken another word. Finally, we emerged into a courtyard where the night air was bitingly clean, scented of snow and pine. A massive black carriage waited, emblazoned with a snarling silver wolf, the royal crest. It looked less like a vehicle and more like a rolling fortress, a prison on wheels. A guard opened the door. Kaelen released my hand only to guide me firmly inside, his touch brief and utterly impersonal. The moment I stumbled onto the plush velvet seat, the door slammed shut with a sound of dreadful finality. The heavy thunk of a bolt sliding home echoed in the small, dark space. I was trapped. The carriage lurched into motion, the rhythmic clatter of hooves on cobblestones, a grim soundtrack to the frantic pounding of my heart. Alone in the dim interior, I hugged myself. The fine silk of my dress felt like a shroud. What had just happened? What could the legendary ice-hearted Alpha King possibly want with me? Was this a cruel lesson? A punishment for my public display of weakness? A demonstration of how absolute power could rewrite a life on a whim? Tears threatened again, hot and stinging, but I wiped them away with a furious hand. No, not here. Not in this gilded cage rolling toward an unknown fate. A spark of defiance, the same one that had flickered when facing Isolde, began to smolder in my chest. I was Elara of the Mistwood Pack. I had survived my sister's venom and my mate's betrayal. I would survive this. The journey felt eternal. Peeking through a crack in the heavy curtain, I watched the familiar forests of my home give way to jagged, unfamiliar mountains that clawed at a sky now littered with icy, distant stars. We were climbing high into the forbidding peaks that were the heart of the Blackwood territory. After an eternity, the carriage slowed. The sounds of a bustling keep did not greet us, only the mournful howl of the wind and the crunch of gravel under the wheels. The door swung open, and the cold stole the breath from my lungs. Kaelen stood there, a silhouette against the star-strewn night. He didn't offer his hand. He simply waited. "Where are we?" My voice was a rasp, raw from disuse and the cold. "Home," he replied, the word flat and empty. "The obsidian fortress." I stepped out, my legs stiff and my breath caught in a silent gasp. It wasn't a castle. It was a mountain that had been carved into a monument of nightmares and power. The obsidian fortress rose before me, a terrifying masterpiece of black stone shot through with veins of shimmering dark rock. Its towers were like sharpened fangs against the moonlit sky, its walls sheer and seamless. No warm light glowed from its countless narrow windows. It emitted no welcome. It was a place of silence, strength, and immense, crushing loneliness. It was not a home. It was the tomb of a winter king, and he had just brought me to be entombed with him. Without a word, he turned and walked toward a colossal arched gateway. I followed, because what choice did I have? The wind whipped my thin dress, and I pulled the borrowed cloak tighter, my teeth beginning to chatter. Inside, the cold was deeper, more profound. It was the seep of stone that had never known sunlight. My footsteps echoed in a cavernous entrance hall so vast the ceiling was lost in shadow. Massive pillars, carved to resemble trees of black ice, held the weight of the mountain above. Torches flickered, their light fighting a losing battle against the gloom. A woman emerged from the shadows, her footsteps silent. She was older, her silver hair in a severe knot, her eyes the color of flint. She assessed me with one swift glance before bowing low to Kaelen. "Your Majesty?" "Lyra," Kaelen's voice echoed. "See her settled, the Sky Wing. She is to have everything she requires." The Sky Wing? My mind reeled. That was the private wing of the royal family, rumored to be reserved for a queen. The words felt like a bitter mockery. Lyra's expression didn't change, but a flicker of something, shock, disapproval, passed through her eyes. "As you command, Your Majesty." Kaelen turned his head slightly, his gaze finally returning to me. It was no less intense. "You will be safe here. No one will harm you." It sounded less like a reassurance and more like a command issued about a valuable, troublesome asset. Then he turned and strode away, his form swallowed by the shadows of a different corridor, leaving me alone with the stern Lyra. "This way, my lady," Lyra said, the title a hollow formality. I followed her through a labyrinth of whispering stone passages, up sweeping staircases that seemed to climb forever. The scale was disorienting, meant to diminish. Finally, we reached ornate double doors. Lyra pushed them open. I stepped inside and stopped. The room was breathtakingly opulent, larger than my entire family home. It was a symphony of muted silvers, deep blues, and creamy whites. A fire roared in a massive hearth, casting dancing light on plush rugs and elegant furniture. A vast bed heaped with furs dominated one wall. A balcony overlooked the terrifying, majestic mountain range. It was luxurious beyond imagining. It was, without doubt, the most beautiful cage I had ever seen. "Your belongings will be sent for," Lyra stated. "Do you require anything immediately?" I shook my head, voiceless. What could I require? My freedom? My stolen future? The simple, shattered love I thought I'd had? Lyra gave a curt nod. "A meal will be brought. You are not to leave this wing without an escort." The command was polite, but absolute. Then she was gone, the doors closing with a soft, definitive click. Alone. The crushing silence of the fortress pressed in, heavier than any walls. I walked to the fire and stared into the flames. He had not hurt me. He had given me a queen's chamber. But the coldness in his eyes, the impersonal tone, the sheer terrifying power of his presence, it all screamed one truth. I was not his mate. I was his prisoner, a prize claimed in a moment of inexplicable madness, and he clearly had no idea what to do with me. I walked to a tall mirror. A pale girl with wild hair and a torn dress stared back, her eyes wide with exhaustion and fear. She looked like a ghost haunting a palace. Later, picking at the food, I heard faint voices from the hallway. I crept to the door. Completely unstable. After 10 years, his wolf wakes for that? A young, frantic voice whispered. "Silence," Lyra's sharp hiss cut through the air. "Do you wish to be exiled? His word is law. The girl is here, that is all." "But the curse, they say his wolf is a curse, and now he's brought it right into the heart of the fortress?" Not another word. Lyra's voice was a whip crack. The footsteps faded. I leaned against the door, trembling. The curse, his wolf silent for 10 years. A shiver that had nothing to do with the cold traced my spine. What kind of monster had I been chained to? A king with no soul, no wolf, no heart? And somehow I was the one who had woken the beast. The thought was so terrifying it turned my blood to ice. I was a prisoner in a gilded cage, trapped with a king who was more legend than man, a man haunted by a past I couldn't fathom. And outside my door, in the cold, dark corridors of the obsidian fortress, the whispers of a curse were already weaving a new web around me. My new life had begun, and it was far more dangerous than the one I had lost. Chapter 3. Whispers in the Frost. The first dawn in the obsidian fortress did not bring warmth. It brought a pale gray light that seeped through the high windows, revealing the room in all its stark, luxurious detail. I had not slept. I had spent the long hours curled in a chair by the fire, listening to the fortress breathe, the groan of ancient stone, the distant, mournful wind, the precise, echoing tread of guards on their rounds. Each sound was a reminder of my isolation, my new reality as a specimen in a frozen menagerie. A soft knock preceded Lyra's entrance. She was followed by 2 maids carrying armfuls of fabric. "For you, my lady," Lyra said, her voice devoid of inflection. The maids laid out gowns upon the vast bed, rich velvets in forest green and midnight blue, silks the color of fresh snow, all in the severe, elegant cuts of the royal court. They were beautiful, costly, and utterly alien. "The king has requested your presence in the sun parlor to break your breakfast," Lyra said. My stomach twisted. A meal? With him? After the terrifying spectacle of the claim and the silent journey, the thought of facing him in the quiet intimacy of a morning room was somehow more daunting. "Requested?" I managed to whisper. Lyra's flinty eyes met mine. "It is not a request you may refuse, my lady." The message was clear. I was to play my part, the nature of which remained a mystery. I chose the simplest gown, a deep blue wool that felt sturdy. The maids dressed me and arranged my hair into a smooth, constricting braid. The mirror showed a stranger, a well-dressed doll with fearful eyes. The wild girl from Mistwood was buried under courtly finery. Lyra led me through the fortress. In the daylight, it was no less imposing. Corridors were vast canyons of black stone, illuminated by shafts of cold light from narrow windows. Tapestries depicting grim battles and stern ancestors lined the walls. There was no color, no softness. It was a monument to permanence and power, and I was a temporary, fragile flicker within it. The sun parlor was a cruel joke. It was a large room with a wall of arched windows that should have offered a breathtaking view. Instead, a thick, milky fog had cloaked the mountains, making the room feel like a ship adrift in a silent white sea. Kaelen was already there, standing by the fireplace, his back to me. He was dressed in black, his posture rigid. He did not turn. A small table was set for two. The silence was a heavy, smothering blanket. I stood uncertainly until Lyra guided me to a chair and then withdrew, closing the door. We were alone. Kaelen finally turned. His golden eyes swept over me, and I fought not to shrink back. He looked even more formidable in the flat gray light, every sharp angle of his face a testament to control. He said nothing, simply moving to take the seat opposite me. Silent servants entered, laying out a spread: warm bread, smoked fish, dried berries, a pot of steaming tea. The aroma should have been comforting, but it only churned my nervous stomach. He began to eat with quiet, efficient focus. He did not look at me. The silence stretched, becoming a tangible, suffocating force. I picked up a piece of bread, but it was like ash in my mouth. I had to speak. I had to know. "Why?" The word escaped me, a broken whisper. He stilled, his knife hovering. Slowly, he set it down. His gaze lifted, and the intensity of it pinned me to my chair. "Why what?" "Why me?" My voice gained a sliver of strength. "You are the Alpha King. You could have anyone. Why claim a rejected beta sister in front of the entire world? Was it pity?" A muscle in his jaw twitched. "Pity is a useless emotion. I do not indulge in it." "Then what? What am I to you?" He studied me for a long, unnerving moment. "There is a bond," he said, the words sounding stiff, foreign, as if he were reciting from a scroll he didn't understand. "My wolf, it recognized you." "Your wolf," I repeated, the hallway whispers echoing. "They say your wolf has been silent for 10 years. They say it's a curse." His eyes flashed, a spark of dangerous fire in the glacial depths. "You would do well to ignore the gossip of servants." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "But is it true?" I pressed, a desperate courage taking hold. "Did your wolf wake for me? A curse waking for a nobody?" He leaned back, his gaze turning analytical, cold. "You are not a nobody. You are my claimed mate. That is your reality now. Your past, your status, your sister, they are irrelevant." He picked up his knife again, a clear dismissal. "You will learn the ways of this court. You will be treated with the respect your position demands. But understand this, Elara. The obsidian fortress is a nest of vipers. Your weakness, your emotion, is a weapon they will use, against you and against me." The words were not a comfort, they were a threat. "Your weakness is a weapon." He was telling me my heart, my very nature, was a liability. He was the king of winter, and he expected me to freeze my soul to survive. Before I could respond, the door opened. A guard entered, bowing low. "Your Majesty, the council awaits. The matter is urgent." Kaelen stood immediately, his meal forgotten. He looked down at me, his expression once again an impenetrable mask of stone. "Lyra will see you back to your chambers. Do not wander." And he was gone, leaving me alone at the table with my confusion and a cold, spreading dread. A bond? A connection? It felt like a lie, a flimsy excuse for an act of world-shattering madness. He had not looked at me with anything resembling tenderness. He had looked at me as a problem to be managed. Lyra reappeared to escort me back. As we walked the silent corridors, my mind raced. A pawn. I was a pawn in a game I didn't understand, moved by a king who saw me as a vulnerability. The gilded cage was not just these rooms, it was the role he was forcing me to play. Back in the solitude of the Skywing, a new resolve, hard and sharp, began to form. I would not be a weakness. I would not be a pawn. If this was to be my life, I would learn the rules of this deadly game. I had to understand the curse. I had to understand the man who was my jailer. My eyes fell on the writing desk. Maybe there were answers, even in a prison. I would start with the only thing I had access to, the fortress itself. I would listen. I would observe. I would find the cracks in the ice, both in the stone and in the king. The rejected girl was gone. In her place was a survivor, determined to uncover the truth, no matter how dangerous it might be. Chapter 4. Echoes of Fire and Ash. Days blurred into a monotonous pattern of silence and observation. I saw Kaelen only at a distance, a dark figure striding through the halls, his presence causing a wave of bowed heads and hushed voices. He did not summon me again. It was as if, having made his shocking claim, he had no further use for the claimed. My world was the Skywing, and the small walled garden Lyra permitted me to walk in, always under guard. The garden was a place of stark beauty, with silvery, hardy plants, and a single ancient pine that seemed to defy the mountain itself. It was there, tracing the rough bark of the pine, that I first heard the name that explained everything. 2 guards, their voices low and unaware of my presence just around a hedge, were speaking. "Never been the same since the night of ashes," one muttered, his voice grim. "Quiet, Bren, you know we don't speak of that. But it's the truth. He was different before, all fire and spirit, like his father. Now he's just ice. And this new girl, she's a spark near a powder keg." The night of ashes. The name sent a chill through me deeper than any mountain wind. I leaned closer, my heart hammering.
"The Alpha Council is restless," the first guard, Bren, continued. "They tolerated the silence for a decade. But this? Claiming an outsider? They see it as madness. Lord Corvin is gathering support. He believes the king is broken. Lord Corvin has always wanted the throne for his own line. This is his chance. I and the king handed it to him. To risk everything for a she-wolf he ignores? It makes no sense." Their footsteps faded, leaving me frozen, the words "night of ashes" burning in my mind. A fire. His parents. It wasn't just a tragedy, it was the forge that created the King of Ice, and now I was the unwitting spark that threatened to ignite a political inferno. That night, a storm descended upon the mountains. The wind screamed around the towers like a chorus of the damned. The fire in my hearth seemed a feeble, futile defiance. As I tried to read, a sound pierced the fury of the storm, a raw, agonized cry of pure despair. It wasn't human. It was the soul-wrenching howl of a wolf in unimaginable pain. It was his wolf. I was on my feet instantly. The sound came from the forbidden West Wing, the king's private quarters. The cry came again, shorter, ragged, a sound of such profound suffering it shook me to my core. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide, but the memory of the guard's words and the sheer lonely agony in that cry pulled at me. He was in there, trapped in a private hell. Was this the curse? Ignoring all warning, I slipped from my room. The corridors were dark, lit by flashes of lightning. The howling had stopped, replaced by a silence more terrible. I moved on instinct, drawn by the echo of pain. I found a heavy, iron-bound door slightly ajar at the end of a secluded hall. Flickering firelight spilled out. Pushing it open just enough to see, my breath caught. It was not a room. It was a shrine to ruin. The chamber was circular, its domed ceiling open to the storm, allowing rain to slick the black floor. In the center stood the charred, skeletal remains of a massive tree. And there, on his knees before it, was Kaelen. He was shirtless, his powerful back tense, glistening with rain and sweat. His head was bowed, his shoulders shaking with silent, shuddering breaths. Scattered around him were objects, a twisted silver locket, a piece of scorched blue velvet, a small blackened training sword. Not artifacts of a king, relics of a son, of a boy. This was the heart of the Knight of Ashes. Here, he wasn't the unfeeling monarch. He was a man drowning in grief so vast it had frozen him solid for 10 years. The cry had been the sound of the ice cracking, and the pain leaking out was devastating. I must have made a sound. His head snapped up. He turned. His eyes were not the cold, golden orbs of the Alpha King. They were wild, blazing with feral grief and a shock of violation that I had seen this, his most shattered self. In a movement too fast to follow, he was on his feet, crossing the room. He loomed over me, not touching me, but his presence was a physical force. "What are you doing here?" He snarled, his voice a guttural rasp, thick with emotion. "This place is forbidden." I heard," I stammered, backing away. "You heard nothing," he roared, the sound echoing off the wet stone. "You saw nothing. My past is not for you to pick through like carrion." His pain was transforming into a rage directed entirely at me. I had trespassed on his soul. "I'm sorry," I whispered, genuine remorse swelling. "I didn't mean to." "Leave." The command was a blast of alpha power that made my knees buckle. It was an expulsion from his heart. I turned and fled, his ragged breathing and the scent of rain and old ashes chasing me back to the skywing. I barred my door, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm. I had sought answers, and I had found them. The truth was far worse than whispers. The king wasn't just cursed, he was haunted. A man living in a tomb of grief, and my presence was violently tearing open the wounds. He didn't see me as a mate, he saw me as a reminder of all he had lost, a trigger for a pain he could no longer control. As I huddled by the fire, the storm raging, I knew one thing with terrifying certainty. I was no longer just a prisoner in a gilded cage. I was a spark in a room full of gunpowder, and the ghost of the Knight of Ashes was watching, waiting for me to set everything ablaze. Chapter 5. The Viper's Visit. A fragile, brittle quiet settled over the fortress after the storm. Kaelen remained a ghost. The fortress itself seemed to hold its breath. I kept to my rooms, the image of the broken king in the rain seared behind my eyes. My fear of him was now tangled with a dangerous, confusing pity. He was a wounded beast, and I was the thorn stuck in his paw. It was in this uneasy lull that the viper came to call. Lyra arrived with a pinched expression. "You have a visitor, my lady, waiting in the frost garden." My heart stuttered. "A visitor? Who?" "Your sister, my lady." Lyra replied, her tone carefully neutral. Lady Isolde. The world tilted. Isolde, here. A fresh wave of humiliation and anger washed over me. What could she possibly want? To gloat? To survey her handiwork? Part of me wanted to refuse, to hide, but the part that had hardened in the mountain air stirred. Isolde had always seen me as weak. I would not give her the satisfaction. I found her in the frost garden, a splash of emerald green against the silver and gray. She turned, a picture of concerned elegance. "Elara, there you are. I've been sick with worry since you were dragged away." She moved as if to embrace me, but I took a deliberate step back. Her smile tightened. "Are you well, sister? This place, it's so severe. Is he kind to you?" "He is the Alpha King," I said, my voice flat. "His treatment is not for me to question." "Oh, Elara," she sighed, dripping false pity. "You don't have to be brave for me. We all know the stories. The silent wolf, the curse. To be bound to such a creature, it must be a nightmare." She leaned in, her voice a venomous whisper. "He hasn't hurt you, has he?" The question hungered for scandal, not truth. "No," I said, firmly, though the memory of his rage flashed. "He has not." Her eyes narrowed, searching for a crack. "Well, that's a relief, but you must be so lonely. He keeps you locked away, doesn't he? Like a shameful secret." She gestured around. "A beautiful cage, but a cage. Does he even speak to you? Or are you just a trophy from a night of regrettable impulse?" Each word was a needle. I felt the old insecurities rising. I clenched my fists. "He is the king," I repeated, the title my only shield. "His actions have thrown the realm into chaos," Isolde retorted, her mask slipping to reveal the ambition beneath. "The Alpha Council is in an uproar. They see his claim on you as instability. They whisper a king ruled by fleeting passion is no king at all." She stepped closer, her gaze intense. "Ronan is worried sick. We all are. This is no life for you. You were meant for quiet comforts, not this." She waved a dismissive hand. "If you were to renounce his claim, to say it was done under duress, the council would protect you. They would nullify it. You could come home." The true purpose of the visit crystallized. This wasn't sisterly concern. This was a recruitment. Isolde and her allies were using me as a weapon against Kaelen. They wanted me to betray him, to give them the excuse to challenge his rule. The temptation flickered. Home, escape from this cold fortress and the haunted king. But then I saw it, the naked ambition in Isolde's eyes. She wasn't offering salvation, she was offering a different cage, with herself as the jailer. "And what would happen to the king if I did that?" I asked quietly. Isolde's smile was cold and sharp. "The king would face the consequences of his actions. The strong endure, the weak fall." The threat hung in the thin air. They wanted to destroy him. I straightened my spine, a fierce, unexpected protectiveness flaring within me. He was broken, angry, scarred, but he was also the only one who had ever looked at me and seen something worth claiming. He was a wounded wolf, and these vultures were circling. "I am the king's claimed mate," I said, my voice gaining a strength that surprised me. "My place is here. Thank you for your concern, sister, but it is no longer required." Shock, then pure fury flashed across Isolde's face. The mask shattered. "You foolish girl! You're choosing a cursed king over your own family? You will regret this. When this fortress falls and takes you with it, do not come crawling back." "Lyra will see you out," I said, turning my back on her, a final, definitive act. I stood alone in the garden long after she'd gone, trembling from the confrontation. But amidst the fear, there was a new, solid core of resolve.
The lines were drawn. Isolde had shown me the battlefield. I was no longer just a captive or a spark. I was a player in a game for a crown, and I had chosen my side. I didn't know if Kaelen would ever see me as anything but a burden, but I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that I would not be the weapon used to break him. The rejected girl was gone. The pawn was off the board. In her place stood a woman who would defend her haunted king, even if he never asked her to. Chapter 6. The King's Gambit. The confrontation with Isolde left me feeling both hollow and electric. The fragile peace was a lie. I had chosen a side, but I stood upon it alone. Kaelen remained a ghost. I saw him training in the lower courtyards, a blur of controlled, violent power. He was preparing for a war, but he was shutting me out completely. The memory of his grief felt like a dream, a crack that had sealed over thicker than before. 3 days after Isolde's visit, the summons came, not from Lyra, but from a stern guardsman. "The king requests your presence in the war room, my lady." The war room. This was business. I was led deep into the mountain's heart, to a windowless chamber smelling of cold stone and old parchment. A massive obsidian table dominated the room, inlaid with a glowing map of the realm. Kaelen stood at its head, his back to me. He wasn't alone. Flanking him were the Alpha Council. I recognized Lord Corvin from the ceremony, his expression cold and calculating. The Vipers. They all turned as I entered. The weight of their collective gaze was immense. Scorn, curiosity, and in Corvin's eyes, pure hatred. I was the symbol of the instability they feared. Kaelen finally turned. His face was a mask of royal authority, but his eyes, when they met mine, were empty. No recognition of our shared pain, no acknowledgement of my defiance. I was a piece on his board. "Lady Elara," he began, his voice echoing, "the realm is unsettled. Whispers of my claim have spread. They question my judgment. They question your place." He paused, his gaze sweeping the council. "Doubt is a weed that must be torn out. To that end, we will host a royal hunt and feast in 3 days. Every alpha of significance will attend." My blood ran cold. A public event. He wasn't hiding me, he was parading me before the wolves who wanted to tear him down. "You will be at my side," he continued, tone leaving no argument. "You will be dressed in the colors of this house. You will carry yourself with the grace and strength befitting your station. You will show them a united front. You will show them strength." It was a command, a performance. He was using me as a prop to prove his stability, to demonstrate control over the problem he created. Your weakness is a weapon. Now he was ordering me to hide it, to become a statue of composure, just like him. Lord Corvin stepped forward. "With respect, Your Majesty, is this wise? To place the source of controversy at the center, it could be seen as a provocation." Kaelen's head turned slowly. The temperature dropped. "It is not a provocation, Lord Corvin. It is a statement. My claim is law. They will look upon her and see my authority. They will see the future of this kingdom. Any who see otherwise," he let the threat hang, "will answer to me." The council lowered their eyes. The message was clear. Challenge her, challenge me. Kaelen's gaze returned to me. "Do you understand your role?" I understood perfectly. I was to be his shield, a living rebuttal to rumors of his weakness. He was gambling his throne on my ability to play a part. I wanted to scream, to ask if he saw me as a person or a tool, but the council watched, waiting for me to falter. I lifted my chin, meeting his empty gaze with a steadiness I did not feel. "I understand, Your Majesty." A flicker of something, surprise, passed through his eyes. A curt nod. "Good.
Lyra will see to your preparations. You are dismissed." As I walked out, the weight of their stares followed. I felt like a lamb being prepared. The king's gambit was set. He was using me as his queen, moving me into the line of fire to protect his king.
But a terrifying thought took root as I returned to my cage. What if the vipers weren't afraid of the king anymore? What if they were just waiting for the perfect moment to strike? And when they did, I, the pawn thrust onto the front lines, would be the first one torn apart. Chapter 7. Forged in Frost. The next 3 days were a whirlwind. Lyra and seamstresses transformed me. They brought midnight blue velvet and silver thread that shone like captured starlight. They created a gown that was both armor and art, its high collar and structured silhouette designed to project unshakable authority. I endured it in silence, my mind a fortress. I practiced the regal posture, the slow walk, the cool gaze. I learned the names and sigils, the web of alliances and grudges. I was a student cramming for a test where failure meant ruin. The morning of the royal hunt dawned clear and bitter. When dressed, the heavy gown felt like a second skin of steel. My hair was intricately braided, a silver circlet on my brow. The mirror showed a queen of ice and shadow. The girl from Mistwood was gone. Kaelen waited at the entrance, astride a massive black warhorse. He was a vision of terrifying power in black armor, the obsidian crown upon his head. His eyes swept over me as I approached, and for a heart-stopping moment they lingered. It wasn't warmth, but it was an acknowledgement. He saw the transformation, and he approved. Without a word, he extended a hand. It was a command to mount the white mare beside him. I placed my hand in his. The now familiar jolt of energy passed between us, a silent crackle of the bond. He released me the moment I was settled, his attention turning to the assembled alphas, all watching with sharp, assessing eyes. The hunt was a brutal display. Kaelen was a force of nature, tracking and bringing down a massive snow bear with lethal grace. I followed at a measured pace, surrounded by guards, my back straight, my face a mask of serene observation. I felt their stares, ignored them, my focus on the dark figure of the king. He never looked back. The feast that evening was the true trial. The great hall was packed, thick with the scent of meat and simmering tension. I sat at Kaelen's right hand, a statue. I moved little, spoke less, my voice clear and steady when I did. I played my part perfectly. Kaelen, too, performed. He was the capable, engaged ruler. But sitting so close, I could feel the tension thrumming through him like a coiled spring. He was holding his kingdom together by will alone. It was during a lull that the first challenge came. Lord Corvin rose, gollop raised. A toast to the king. May his reign be as long and as unexpected as his choice of mate. The insult, disguised as praise, hung in the air. Nervous laughter rippled. All eyes turned to us, waiting for a reaction, waiting for me to flinch. Kaelen's face remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened around his gollop. Before he could speak, I slowly lifted my head. My gaze met Corvin's across the hall. Silence fell. "Thank you, Lord Corvin," I said, my voice carrying effortlessly. "The king's vision has always seen beyond the obvious. He sees strength where others see only tradition. He sees a future where others are trapped in the past.
It is the quality that has kept our kingdoms secure." I paused, letting the words sink in. I offered a small, cool smile. "I am merely grateful to be part of that vision." I did not look at Kaelen. I kept my eyes locked at Corvin, whose smug expression faltered. The hall was utterly silent. I had not defended myself, I had defended his judgment. Then I did the audacious. I gently reached over and placed my hand over Kaelen's clenched fist on the table. The moment my skin touched his, a visible shock went through him. His entire body stiffened. The crackling energy between us flared, potent enough to charge the air. He turned his head slowly, his golden eyes wide with shock that mirrored the stunned silence of the hall. He looked at our joined hands, then at my face, his mask of ice fracturing to reveal raw, bewildered confusion. In that single public touch, I had done more than play my part. I had claimed him back. The spell broke. A grizzled alpha from the north slammed his fist on the table with a loud laugh. "Well said, my lady. The king sees what we cannot. A toast to the king and his sharp-eyed queen." This time, the roar of approval was genuine and united. The tension shattered. The viper's strike had been deflected, not by the king's fury, but by the quiet strength of the queen they had underestimated. Kaelen did not pull his hand away. He turned it, his palm against mine, his fingers curling slightly to encase my hand. It was an answer, an acceptance. He didn't speak to me for the rest of the feast, but as the night wore on, his posture changed. The rigid tension eased. The cold emptiness in his eyes was replaced by a watchful, simmering intensity directed entirely at me. He had planned a gambit to present a united front. He had not expected me to become the front. He had forged me in the frost of his fortress, and in doing so, he had created something far stronger than he anticipated, an ally. As the feast ended and he led me from the hall, his hand still loosely holding mine, the haunted king looked at the stolen bride beside him, and for the first time in a decade, he saw not a curse, but a possibility. Chapter 8. The Cracks in the Ice. The fortress felt different after the feast. The air of silent judgment thinned, replaced by a current of wary respect. Servants offered hesitant smiles. Guards stood a little taller. I was no longer just the king's problematic claim. I was the queen who had faced down Lord Corvin without raising her voice. Kaelen, however, retreated. The connection in the great hall, the touch of our hands, seemed to have unnerved him more than any political challenge. He was distant again, but this distance felt different. Not a dismissal, but a profound, bewildered confusion. 2 days later, a heavy snow fell, blanketing the world in a deep, silencing white. Restless, I wrapped myself in furs and went to the walled garden. The world was hushed, the only sound the crunch of my boots. The ancient pine was bowed under the weight of snow. I was tracing a pattern in the snow on a bench when a shadow fell over me. I looked up, my heart leaping. Kaelen stood there. No crown, no armor, just dark trousers and a tunic. He looked younger, and the lines of grief around his eyes seemed more pronounced. "I did not expect to find you here," he said, his voice quieter than I had ever heard him. "The silence in my rooms was becoming too loud," I replied, my own voice soft.
He nodded, as if he understood that particular kind of noise all too well. He didn't sit, but he didn't leave. He stood looking at the snow-laden pine, his hands clasped behind his back. "You handled Lord Corvin with surprising skill," he said after a long moment, his gaze still fixed ahead. I was defending my king, I said simply. It seemed the only thing to do. He finally turned his head, his golden eyes searching my face. Why? The question was layered, weighted with a decade of isolation. Why defend me? Why stand by me? Why touch my hand? Because they are wrong, I said, meeting his gaze steadily. They see my presence as your weakness, but it wasn't. In that hall, it was my presence that gave you strength. I could feel it. I took a small, hesitant step closer. You have spent 10 years building walls to keep the world out, but you don't have to keep me out, Kaelen. The use of his name hung in the frigid air between us. A flicker of pain crossed his features, so raw and immediate it stole my breath. You don't know what you're asking, he whispered, the words torn from him. Then tell me, I urged, my heart pounding. Tell me about the night of ashes. Tell me what happened to you. He was silent for so long I thought he would turn and walk away, sealing himself off once more. The wind whispered through the pine branches, sending a soft shower of snow to the ground. It was my fault, he said, the words so low I barely heard them. He wasn't looking at me, he was staring into the past. I was young, arrogant. I fell for a daughter from a rival pack. It was forbidden, but I didn't care. We met in secret. I was careless. I was followed. He swallowed hard, his jaw tight. They used our meeting as a diversion. While I was distracted, they set fire to my family's wing, my parents. They were trapped. I could hear them. I could hear my mother. His voice broke, and he squeezed his eyes shut. I tried to get to them. The flames, they were too high. The smoke, I was dragged away. I could do nothing. Nothing. A single, perfect tear escaped, tracing a path down his cheek before freezing in the cold air. It was a tear not of sadness, but of a bottomless, eternal rage at his own failure. The guilt, it was a living thing, eating me from the inside. My wolf, it howled for days, a sound of such pure agony it drove any who heard it to madness. And then it just stopped. It went silent. I thought it had died with them. I prayed it had, because to feel that pain, it was unbearable. So I built a new self, a king of ice, a king who felt nothing, because a king who feels, a king who loves, gets people killed. I listened, my own tears freezing on my lashes. The puzzle pieces snapped into place. The silent wolf wasn't a curse, it was a trauma. His coldness wasn't a lack of heart, it was a fortress built around a heart that had been shattered. Without a word, driven by a profound impulse born of understanding, I closed the final distance between us. I didn't embrace him, I didn't offer empty comfort. Instead, I slowly, gently reached out and placed my hand over his heart, just as I had in the great hall. His eyes flew open, wide with shock. "You are not made of stone, Kaelen," I whispered, my voice trembling with emotion. "Your wolf didn't die, it was just wounded, as were you." He stood frozen, his chest rising and falling rapidly beneath my palm. I could feel the frantic, wild beat of his heart. The air around us crackled, not with political tension, but with something far more primal and intimate. The wall of ice was not just cracking, it was melting under the warmth of my touch, under the sheer, unwavering empathy in my gaze. He looked down at my hand, then back at my face, his expression of utter vulnerability. The Alpha King was gone. In his place was just Kaelen, a man, a wolf, haunted, broken, and being offered a kindness he believed he no longer deserved. He didn't pull away, he didn't speak, he simply stood there, allowing my touch, allowing me to see the devastating truth of him.
and in that silent, snow-filled garden, surrounded by the ghosts of his past, a new, fragile seed of trust was planted in the frozen ground between us. The stolen bride was no longer just defending her king, she was beginning to heal the man. Chapter 9. The Poisoned Chalice. The fragile truce that bloomed in the garden was as delicate as a frost flower. Kaelen did not seek me out again, but the fortress felt different. When our paths crossed, he would meet my gaze, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. The ice was thinner now. I could sense the turbulent water flowing beneath. A week later, the fortress prepared for a crucial diplomatic envoy, Alpha Boren, of the neutral Stonemount Pack. A formal dinner was arranged in the smaller, opulent Amber Hall. I dressed with care in a deep burgundy gown. When I entered, Kaelen was already speaking with Boren, a grisly one but good-natured wolf. His eyes found mine across the room, and they held. The cold emptiness was gone, replaced with a watchful intensity that made my heart skip. He had saved the seat beside him, a small gesture, but it screamed volumes. As I took it, his hand briefly brushed mine as he adjusted my chair. The contact was electric, a silent reaffirmation. The dinner began pleasantly. Boren was straightforward, uninterested in court politics, and seemed genuinely taken by my quiet demeanor. For the first time, I felt a flicker of true hope. This was what it could be, a partnership. It happened during the third course. Lord Corvin, watching with a serpent's stillness, raised his golobant. A toast to our Stonemount allies. May our bonds be as strong as the mountains. The toast was met with agreeable murmurs. As wine was poured, a young, nervous page stumbled, sloshing wine near me. Apologies were made, cloths were brought. But I noticed something. The page's eyes, wide with fear, had flicked not to me, but to Lord Corvin, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. A cold dread, separate from the mountain chill, crept up my spine. I pushed my food around my plate, my appetite gone. I watched as the server filled Boren's special silver chalice, a sign of respect. Boren drank deeply. For a few minutes, nothing. Then he set the cup down with a clatter, his brow furrowing. The firewood here must be damp, he joked, loosening his collar. I feel a sudden chill. A moment later, his face contorted. A strangled gasp escaped his lips. He clutched his throat, his face turning a horrifying purple. He staggered to his feet, his chair crashing over, before collapsing onto the rug, his body convulsing. Pandemonium.
Shouts of alarm, guards rushing forward. Kaelen was on his feet instantly, his face a mask of thunderous fury. A healer, now! But it was too late. The convulsions stopped. Alpha Boren lay still, eyes wide and unseeing, dead. In the stunned, horrific silence, a voice sharp with practiced alarm cut through. "The chalice!" Isolde cried out, pushing forward. She knelt, her face a portrait of horrified discovery. She picked up the fallen silver cup, sniffed it, her expression turning grim. "Wolfsbane! I smell wolfsbane!" A collective, terrified gasp. Wolfsbane. Fast. Undetectable. Deadly. "But where would someone get such a thing?" Ronan's voice rang out, perfectly timed. Isolde's gaze swept the room, a tragic heroine. Then her eyes landed on me, filled with a sorrow more terrifying than any accusation. "The king's private garden," she said, her voice trembling with false grief. "The one he showed to Lady Elara. It's the only place in the kingdom the plant is cultivated for study." She looked directly at me. "It's her private sanctuary." The trap was sprung with a devastating, perfect click. The world stopped. Every eye, every shred of respect I'd earned transformed into hot, blinding suspicion. The whispers began, venomous and swift. Jealous, a nobody threatened. The king's curse made her mad. My head spun.
I looked at Kaelen, my eyes pleading, but his face was a terrifying blank slate. He was looking from the dead alpha to the chalice to me, his mind reeling, the ghosts of his past, of betrayal and deadly consequences rising to choke him. I saw the calculation in his eyes, the king weighing evidence, political catastrophe. The fragile trust was a seedling being crushed. "This is a lie!" My voice was a strained whisper, lost in the rising tide. Kaelen's gaze settled on me. The intensity was back, but it was no longer warm. It was the look of a sovereign assessing a threat. The ice had not just refrozen, it had turned to diamond-hard certainty. Before I could speak, his voice, cold and absolute, shattered my world. "Seize her." Royal guards moved, their hands firm on my arms. The betrayal in his eyes was a physical blow, worse than any poison. He had chosen, in the face of evidence, in the face of his trauma, he had chosen to believe the lie. As they dragged me from the hall, the last thing I saw was Kaelen's face, a mask of royal fury and devastating pain. He had built his kingdom on the ashes of one betrayal, and now he believed I had brought him another. The stolen bride had become the accused murderer, and her king had just become her chief prosecutor. Chapter 10: The Dungeon's Forge. The descent was a blur of cold stone and colder faces. They did not take me to a cell with bars, but to a pit, a deep cylindrical hole carved into the living rock, with a heavy iron grate for a ceiling. The grate clanged shut above me. The footsteps receded. Silence. The only light filtered from a single torch above, casting monstrous shadows. A steady drip, drip, drip of water echoed, a maddening metronome. "Seize her." The words echoed in the crushing silence, more painful than the cold stone. He had not questioned me. He had looked at the evidence, at Isolde's perfect performance, and condemned me. The fragile trust, the understanding in the garden, was an illusion, shattered like glass. I crumpled onto the damp ground, drawing my knees to my chest. The tears came then, hot and silent. They were not of self-pity, but of a profound, soul-crushing betrayal. I had started to believe in him, to see the man beneath the crown, and in return he had thrown me into the dark. The court whispers twisted into the voice of my own deepest fears. "You are nothing, a temporary distraction, born to be set aside, a weakness." Isolde was right, Ronan was right, even Kaelen in his actions had proven them right. My empathy, my heart, a flaw that led to ruin. I had tried to be strong, to be a queen, and it led me to a hole in the ground. I wept until I was hollow, a shell of despair. The darkness pressed in, a physical weight. This was my fate, to be discarded, first by my mate, then by my family, now by my king. But as I lay there in the emptiness, something began to stir, a faint, stubborn ember in the ashes of my heart. It was not hope. Hope was for fools in the light. This was something older, harder. Rage. It started as a slow, burning coal in my stomach, a cold, quiet fury that spread through my veins, warming me against the chill. I thought of Isolde's triumph, of Ronan's cowardice, of Lord Corvin's calculation. They had orchestrated this, murdered a good man and framed me to break a king they saw as weak. And Kaelen, he had played right into their hands. His own trauma, his fear of betrayal made their perfect pawn. So afraid of a repeat of the Night of Ashes that he created a new one, with me as the sacrifice. The tear tracks on my face grew cold and tight. My sobs subsided. The dripping water was no longer a sound of torture. It was a rhythm for my resolve. I had been a victim my whole life, a victim of ambition, a victim of a broken promise, a victim of a curse. I had let their choices define me, break me, discard me. Not anymore. The thought was clear and sharp, cutting through despair. I sat up, my spine straightening against the stone wall, my trembling hands clenched into fists. They could put me in a pit, they could call me a murderer, he could break my heart, but I would not let them break me. I was Elara of Mistwood, claimed by the Alpha King. I had stood before the court and held my ground. I had faced the king's grief and not look away. I was not the weak, rejected girl they believed. That girl died in the Amber Hall, poisoned just as surely as Alpha Boren. Alone in the dark, I made a vow, not to a king, not to a mate, not to a god, to the last stubborn ember of my last soul. I will not let you win, I whispered to the darkness, my voice no longer trembling, but shaking with the promise of a storm. I will not be set aside. I would face whatever came next, trial, condemnation, but I would do it on my feet. I would not cower, I would not beg. I would look Kaelen Blackwood in the eye and show him the strength he had been too blind to see. The stolen bride was gone. The accused murderer was a role they forced on me. But in the deepest pit of the obsidian fortress, a queen was forged in fire and shadow, her heart hardened to steel, her will sharpened to a blade, and she was ready for war.
The world above my pit was a storm of a different kind. Kaelen stood in his war room, the same chamber where he had coolly presented me as his gambit. Now the air was thick with the acrid scent of his own rage and guilt. All he could see was Boren's lifeless body, and overlaid my terrified, betrayed eyes. Seize her. The words echoed, a toxic refrain. He had acted on instinct, the king's instinct, forged in the fire of his parents' betrayal. See a threat, neutralize it. But the moment the guards dragged me away, a part of him, the part that was Wolf, had screamed in protest. The bond pulled taut, throbbing with a pain that was not his own. Lord Corvin stood before him, grimly satisfied. A tragic but necessary revelation, Your Majesty. The girl was a poison. Now the kingdom sees the danger of an emotional attachment. Kaelen's head snapped up, eyes blazing. Do not presume to lecture me, Corvin, you who have coveted this throne since my father's day. Corvin looked affronted, but not afraid. My concern is stability. With Stonemount lost, we need swift action, a public trial, a swift condemnation, and then a strong political union to mend fractures. My daughter, for instance. Get out, Kaelen snarled, the sound barely human. Corvin retreated, leaving Kaelen with the roaring in his head, the same serpent's song Isolde had sung. They were all maneuvering him, using this catastrophe. He slammed his fist on the obsidian table, the stone cracking. Chaos, the very thing he'd dedicated his life to preventing, and Elara was at the center. He saw her face again, not in fear, but as in the garden, soft, understanding, her hand warm over his heart. You are not made of stone, Kaelen. A frantic knock. Before he could answer, Ronan burst in, pale, composure shattered. Your Majesty, you must listen. Kaelen turned a withering gaze on him. You have no right to demand anything, Beta. Your part is far from clear. It's Isolde, Ronan blurted, desperate. Her plan, all of it. She manipulated me, said we needed to remove Elara to protect the kingdom from instability, said you were weak. She procured the wolfsbane, paid a page to switch the chalices. I didn't know she meant to kill. I thought it was just to discredit. The confession tumbled out. Kaelen stared, the pieces snapping into a horrifying picture. So simple, so ruthless. He'd been focused on external threats, missing the venom in his own court. And Boren, Kaelen's voice was deadly quiet. A necessary sacrifice in her eyes, Ronan whispered, trembling. Rage, cold and absolute, flooded Kaelen. This was not the political betrayal of the Night of Ashes. This was calculated domestic evil, and he had fallen for it. He had allowed his past to blind him, handing Elara to her enemies. Where is she now? Gone, Ronan slumped. She knew I would break, fled the moment Elara was taken. She's gone to join Lord Corvin, to rally the disaffected packs. The war was here, within his walls, and he had imprisoned his only true ally. He dismissed Ronan, mind racing. A public trial was now impossible. Presenting the confession would look like a desperate fabricated defense. It would fuel the rebellion. They had outmaneuvered him perfectly. He needed proof. He needed to undo his catastrophic mistake without shattering his kingdom. He had to be a king, even as his wolf howled to break down the dungeon doors. He strode to a hidden panel in the wall and pressed a sigil. It slid open. He would do this himself. The dungeons were silent as a tomb. He moved like a shadow to Elara's pit and looked down. She was not weeping, not crumpled. She stood in the center, her back straight, her head high, staring at the wall as if she could see through stone. Her expression was not despair, but cold, formidable resolve. The sight struck him like a physical blow. His breath caught. She sensed him and slowly lifted her gaze. Her eyes met his. No plea, no fear, only a clear, icy fury that mirrored his own. "Have you come to pass sentence, Your Majesty?" Her voice was flat, steady, the title a weapon. "Ronan confessed," Kaelen said, voice rough. "It was Isolde. The poisoning was her doing." Elara did not react with surprise. She nodded, as if expecting nothing less. "And what will you do now?" "I cannot free you publicly," he said, the words ash, not with proof that would hold against Corvin's influence. A king's word against a spurned beta's confession would be seen as a weak man protecting a murderous mate. It would start the war they want. A bitter smile touched Elara's lips. "So I remain your prisoner." "No," he said, his voice dropping, intense, earnest. "You become my secret, my agent, my partner in truth." He knelt, bringing his eyes level with hers through the grate. The Alpha King on his knees, begging a prisoner for help. The world upside down. "Help you how?" Isolde fled. She is the key. She will have evidence, the wolfsbane source, messages, something tying Corvin to the plot. I need you to find it. I will give you whatever you need, but it must be in shadow. You are the only one they will not expect, the only one I can trust. He was offering not just freedom, but a mission, a purpose, acknowledging her strength, her value as a weapon. Elara looked at him, at the raw, unvarnished plea in his eyes. This was not the Ice King. This was Kaelen, the man, admitting failure and asking for help. The rage in her heart shifted, transforming from a destructive fire into a forging one. She took a step closer to the grate, eyes locked with his. "Tell me what to do." Chapter 12, The Shadow Queen. The grate did not open to freedom, but to the silent slide of a hidden passage. Kaelen stood in the tunnel darkness, a hooded cloak in his hands. He held it out. I did not hesitate. I stepped from the pit into the secret corridor, stone cold under my bare feet. I took the cloak, its heavy, dark wool a stark contrast to my gown. I pulled the hood up, shadowing my face. The transformation was immediate, no longer the accused queen, a phantom. "This leads to the old servants' quarters," Kaelen murmured, a hooded cloak in his hands. He held it out. I did not hesitate. I stepped from the pit into the secret corridor, stone cold under my bare feet. I took the cloak, its heavy, dark wool a stark contrast to my gown. I pulled the hood up, shadowing my face. The transformation was immediate, no longer the accused queen, a phantom. "This leads to the old servants' quarters," Kaelen murmured. "You will be safe there. Lyra will bring provisions. She is trusted." He didn't touch me. No apology. There was no time. The air was charged with urgent understanding. We were co-conspirators. What is my first move? Isolde was meticulous but arrogant. She would have kept something, a trophy, proof of her cleverness. He handed me a small folded parchment, a map. Her chamber is in the lower west wing, near the abandoned aviary. It was our mother's solarium. She always loved it. The personal detail was a gift of trust, a key to understanding my enemy. The guards?
Redirected. You have 2 hours after midnight, but be swift. Corvin's spies are everywhere. He looked at me, eyes gleaming in torchlight. If you are caught... I understand the consequences, I finished. To be caught would prove his weakness and my guilt, the end for both. A sharp nod. Lyra will guide you. From there, you are on your own. He melted into shadows. Moments later, Lyra appeared, her face stern, eyes holding a grim respect. She gestured. I followed. The journey through hidden arteries was silent, ghostly. We moved through spaces between walls, behind tapestries, down forgotten stairs. My senses were heightened. I was a shadow, breath quiet, movements fluid. The rejected girl was gone. A hunter remained. Lyra stopped before a section of blank wall. The entrance is behind this stone. Push the top right corner. The solarium is beyond. You have 2 hours. She pressed a small, cold object into my hand, a slim silver lockpick, in case her arrogance did not extend to leaving it unlocked. Then she was gone. I was alone in stifling darkness. I found the mechanism, pushed. The stone slid inward with a soft sigh. I slipped through into a room frozen in time. The solarium was haunting. A dome of grimy glass revealed the star-dusted sky. The room was filled with skeletal plant remains, everything covered in fine silt. It smelled of dry decay and old memories. This tomb of a dead queen was where Isolde had woven her web. I moved with a predator's silence. I ignored obvious places. I thought of her vanity, her need to be the cleverest. My eyes fell on a warped harp, its strings snapped. One tuning peg looked newer, shinier. I reached, tried to turn it. It didn't move. I pulled. It came away, revealing a hollow compartment. Inside, tightly rolled, a single sheet of parchment. My heart hammered as I unrolled it. Not a confession, better, a list, in Isolde's elegant script. At the top, Lord Corvin. Below, alphas of the Blood Moon and Stonefang packs. Next to each, a sum of gold, a promise of land, a ledger of betrayal. The final entry made my blood run cold. At the bottom, source, Nightshade Monastery. Payment, the Western Pass. The Nightshade Monastery was a ruin of rogue healers and forbidden arts. The Western Pass was a strategic, fortified entry point to the kingdom. Isolde hadn't just bought allies, she'd bought wolfsbane from a forbidden source and paid with a piece of the kingdom's defense. This wasn't just treason, it was an act of war. I carefully re-rolled the parchment, tucked it into a hidden cloak pocket. The evidence was damning, everything he needed. I was about to leave when a sound froze me. Muffled voices from the main corridor, the clank of armor. Search every room, Corvin's orders. The king is hiding something. Start with the abandoned wings. My 2 hours were up. Corvin was making his move. I was trapped. The hidden passage was across the room, no way to reach it unseen. The door handle rattled. In sheer panic, my she-wolf instincts took over. I didn't think, I moved. As the door began to open, I leaped not for the passage, but upwards. My fingers found carvings on a stone pillar. I pulled myself up, scrambling into the dark, cobwebbed space where the dome met the wall, flattening myself against cold stone just as 2 guards entered, torches casting long, searching shadows. I held my breath, body pressed into shadows, heart a frantic drum. I was the Shadow Queen, hidden in plain sight, the proof of the kingdom's salvation burning against my breast. Chapter 13. The Trap is Sprung. I clung to the shadows, my muscles screaming. Below, the guards moved with lazy thoroughness, kicking at dust piles, poking dead plants with their spears. Nothing but ghosts and spiderwebs, one grumbled. Corvin's getting paranoid. Or the king's smarter than he looks, the other replied, shining his torch near the harp. The beam passed inches from my hiding place. I pressed myself flatter, becoming one with the stone. Check the aviary and report. This place gives me the creeps. They left, closing the door. I didn't move until their footsteps faded completely. Then I slipped back into the hidden passage. My mind raced. Corvin was searching the abandoned wings. He was getting nervous, tightening his net. Time was running out. Lyra was waiting in the safe room. Without a word, I handed her the rolled parchment. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly as she read. She looked up at me, a fierce approval in her gaze. "This is it," she whispered, "but we cannot simply hand it to the king. Corvin would claim it was forged. We need him to reveal himself." "How?" My voice was tight. "The king has called a gathering of the loyal alphas in the Amber Hall at dawn to address Boren's death and the unrest. Corvin will be there, confident, thinking the king has no proof." A grim smile touched her lips. "We must spring the trap in front of them all, make him confess." The plan was audacious, terrifying. It relied on Kaelen's ability to play the hardest part of all, the defeated, cornered king. "What do you need me to do?" "You must be there, hidden. You are the witness. You found the truth. When the moment is right, you will emerge. Your presence alone will be a shock that rattles him. The rest will be up to the king." As the first hints of dawn tinged the sky, the Amber Hall was filled with tense, expectant silence. The remaining loyal alphas were seated. Kaelen sat on his throne, his face drawn, the picture of a ruler burdened by grief and failure. He looked every bit the king whose world was crumbling. Lord Corvin stood before him, posture radiating confidence and false sympathy. "Your Majesty," Corvin began, voice dripping with concern, "the tragic death of Alpha Boren hangs over us. The Stonemount Pack demands answers. The realm demands stability. We can no longer be afforded to be led by sentiment." He paused, letting the accusation hang. "The murderer sits in your dungeon. Justice must be served publicly. And then we must discuss the future of the crown, for the good of all." A direct challenge, a demand for my execution and Kaelen's abdication. Kaelen looked down, shoulders slumping in a show of defeat. "You believe the evidence against Lady Elara is incontrovertible, Corvin?" "It is, Your Majesty," Corvin said, a triumphant gleam in his eye. "The poison came from her garden. The motive of a jealous, unstable woman is clear. There is no other explanation." From my hidden alcove behind a tapestry, I watched, heart pounding. This was the moment. "No other explanation?" Kaelen's voice was soft, but it carried. He lifted his head and the defeated posture fell away like a discarded cloak. His eyes, which had seemed weary, now blazed with a cold, focused fire. The change was so sudden, so absolute, that a ripple of unease went through the room. What if the wolfsbane did not come from the royal garden at all?
Corvin's smile faltered. "Impossible. The plant is unique." "Is it?" Kaelen interrupted, voice sharp as a blade. He rose, walking towards Corvin, each step a measured threat. What if it came from another source, a forbidden source? The Nightshade Monastery? A stunned silence. Corvin's face went pale. "A ridiculous accusation, a myth." "Is it?" Kaelen pressed. And what if the payment was not gold, but a promise to grant the Western Pass to a pack with a grudge against the Stone Fangs? Corvin took a step back, confidence shattering. Slander! You have no proof. Don't I? At that moment, I stepped out from behind the tapestry. Gasps erupted. I stood there, not in rags, but in a simple dark gown, my head high, my face calm. I was supposed to be in the dungeons, condemned. My presence was a seismic shock. Corvin stared, mouth agape, pure panic in his eyes. A trick, a shapeshifter, an illusion. There is no trick, Corvin, I said, my voice clear and steady, carrying to every corner. I looked at Kaelen, and he gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. The only illusion was the one you and my sister created. I found the truth in the dust of the old solarium. I found your ledger. I didn't produce the parchment. I didn't need to. The look on Corvin's face was confession enough. You treacherous snake, a loyal alpha roared, surging to his feet. Corvin, cornered and desperate, his plot unraveling before the entire court, broke. It was her, he shrieked, pointing a trembling finger, his mind reeling. Isolde! It was all her idea. She promised me the throne. She said the king was weak, that he would fall. I only provided support. She procured the poison. She paid the page. She killed Boren. The admission, loud, frantic, and unprompted, echoed in the dead silence. It was over. Kaelen looked at me, and in his eyes I saw it all. The apology, the gratitude, the dawning, terrifying realization of what I was and what I meant to him. I was not his weakness. I was his strength. I was his queen. He turned to the stunned guards. The Lord Corvin has confessed to treason and conspiracy to murder. Take him. As guards seized the sputtering, broken lord, the hall erupted into chaos, but it was chaos of relief and righteous fury. The loyal alphas surrounded Kaelen, their faith restored. But Kaelen's eyes were only for me. He walked towards me, the crowd parting. He stopped before me, the noise fading to a distant hum. "The trap is sprung," he said softly, for my ears only. I met his gaze, the cold fury in my heart settling into a steady, unwavering resolve. "The war is not over," I replied. "Isolde is still out there." He nodded, expression grim. "I know. But now," he said, his voice filled with a new, fierce certainty, "we fight it together." Chapter 14. The Stolen Crown. The victory in the Amber Hall was a declaration, not an end. The revelation purged the court of its most venomous elements, but the poison had spread. Isolde had not fled empty-handed. She had taken something far more valuable than gold. The news arrived by a breathless, bloodied scout who collapsed in the fortress courtyard at midday. Kaelen and I rushed to his side. "Your Majesty," the scout gasped, clutching a broken arm. "The Western Pass! It's fallen!" A cold dread, colder than any mountain wind, swept through us. The Western Pass was the gateway to the kingdom's richest valleys. Its loss was catastrophic. "How?" Kaelen's voice was dangerously quiet. "Lady Isolde," the scout choked. "She was there, carried the king's seal and orders signed with your name, commanding the garrison to stand down for allied troops from the Stone Fang pack. They believed her. The moment the gates opened, the Stone Fangs and Blood Moon packs swarmed. They slaughtered the garrison. They have the pass." The king's seal. Isolde must have stolen it in her final days. A final devastating betrayal. She hadn't just paid for Wolfsbane with the pass. She had used Kaelen's own authority to deliver it to her enemies. The alphas erupted in fury and fear. "They'll pour into the lowlands, cut us off from the south. We are besieged." Kaelen stood perfectly still, face a mask of stone, but I could see the storm in his eyes. This was the night of ashes all over again, betrayal from within leading to catastrophic loss. The ghosts were laughing. He turned, his gaze sweeping over the panic. "Enough." The single word infused with his alpha power silenced them all. "She has stolen my seal," he said, voice cutting through fear. "She has stolen a fortress, but she has not stolen my crown." He turned to mine, his eyes in me, a question, a plea. He was the strategist, but the wound was too fresh. He needed my clarity, my strength. I stepped forward, not to him, but to face the alphas. I was still the girl from a minor pack, but I carried an authority that now felt innate. "Isolde believes she has won," I said, my voice clear and carrying. "She believes she has outsmarted the king and divided his allies. She believes we will be paralyzed by fear." I paused. "She is wrong. She has shown her hand. She has the pass, but she does not have the loyalty of the packs she leads. They follow out of greed. Their alliance is a blade of glass. It will shatter under the first blow." I turned to Kaelen. "You are the Alpha King. Your strength is not in a piece of wax and metal. It is in the loyalty you have earned, in the justice you showed today. It is in the wolves who stand with you now." The fear in their eyes began to shift to simmering resolve. They looked at me, this woman who had emerged from the dungeons to save their king, and they saw a leader. Kaelen watched me, a profound shift occurring within him. She wasn't just healing his heart, she was commanding his army. She was the partner he never knew he needed. "What is your counsel?" he asked, his voice formal, granting me the platform. I didn't hesitate. I moved to the map table, my finger tracing a route south of the pass, through a treacherous, little-known series of mountain paths. The Serpent's Spine. "We do not attack the fortress. That is what they expect. It's strong and they have numbers." My finger stopped on a thin, winding path labeled the Serpent's Spine. "We take a smaller, faster force, the best warriors. We go through here. We do not attack the fortress. We slip past it." Murmurs of disbelief. "The Serpent's Spine. It's a death march. No army has passed." "We will not be an army," I said, eyes blazing. "We will be a shadow. We emerge behind their lines, in the valleys they think are safe. We rally the southern packs who are now cut off. We show them their king is not defeated. We show the traitors they are the ones surrounded."
I looked at Kaelen. "We take the fight to them, not with a wall of steel, but with a blade of truth and surprise. We steal back the initiative." The plan was bold to the point of madness, a gamble that risked everything on a path of ghosts and a hope of rallying a scattered people. Kaelen looked from the map to my determined face, to the faces of his alphas, now watching me with awe and dawning hope. He saw the path not of a king, but of a legend, a path she was carving for him. He made his decision. "We march at nightfall," Kaelen declared, his voice ringing with a new, untamed power. "Prepare the elite guard. We take the Serpent's Spine." He walked to my side, his presence a solid, unwavering force beside me. "You will be at my side," he said, and it was not a command, but a vow. "You will be my general in this." The war had begun, but as we stood together, planning our desperate counterstrike, a new truth settled. Isolde had stolen a crown of gold and land, but the true crown of loyalty, sacrifice, unbreakable will was being forged here in the fire of adversity, and it was being placed, by earned honor, upon the head of the stolen bride. The Serpent's Spine was not a path, it was a gauntlet. For 5 days we marched in single file along crumbling ledges, the way lit by moon and eerie glowing moss. Icy winds threatened to pluck us from the mountainside. We forded rivers of meltwater so cold it stole our breath. Kaelen led from the front, a figure of grim determination, but it was I who became the soul of our company. I did not command, but my quiet endurance was a beacon. When a young warrior's nerve broke on an exposed ledge, my calm voice talked him down, my hand pulled him to safety. I shared rations, tended to blisters, moved among the shivering warriors at night. My presence was a silent promise. Kaelen watched. He saw the way his hardened elite began to look at me, not wary respect, but something deeper, fiercer, loyalty. I was no longer just the king's mate, I was their lady, their comrade, forging a bond with his pack that he, in his isolation, had never quite managed. On the 6th day, we descended into the lush green valleys of the south. The peace was an illusion. The first village was a smoldering ruin, fields trampled, homes burned, the sigil of the blood moon pack scorched on doors. Survivors, old men, women, children, huddled in the woods, eyes hollow with terror. "They came 3 days ago," their elder whispered, trembling before Kaelen. "Took everything, said the king in the mountains was dead, that a new order had come." Rage, hot and righteous, burned through our weary warriors. This was the fruit of Isolde's victory, not glorious conquest, but petty, brutal tyranny. Kaelen's face was a thunderhead. He turned to his troops, voice low and deadly. "This is the strength of our enemies. This is the future they offer." It was I who stepped forward. I walked past Kaelen, knelt in the mud before the trembling elder, took his gnarled hands in mine. "The king is not dead," I said, my voice firm yet gentle, carrying. "He is here, and he has not forgotten you." I stood, addressed the gathered villagers. "The traitors told you a lie. They stole the western pass with deceit and murder, but they do not hold the loyalty of these lands. They only hold fear, and we are here to take it back." I didn't look to Kaelen for permission. I spoke from my heart. My words were a spark on tinder. The hopelessness in their eyes shifted to a flicker of defiant fire. News spread like wildfire. Allies came to us, small warrior bands, farmers with scythes and bows, all united by fury against the ravagers. They came to the banner of the Alpha King, but their eyes were drawn to the woman who walked beside him, who spoke not of conquest, but of restoration. In a week, our small force swelled into a ragged but determined army, camped in a hidden basin at the edge of the occupied lowlands. The time had come. The stolen Western Pass fortress lay a day's march. The night before the battle, Kaelen found me at the camp's edge, looking at the sea of campfires that represented our hope. "You have given them something I could not," he said quietly. I shook my head. I only reminded them of what they already had, a love for their homes, a desire for justice. You are their king. You are their strength in battle. I am just their voice. "You are far more than that," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he could no longer name. He turned to me, moonlight silvering his features. The touch was electric, a silent confession. "When I claimed you, it was a primal act, a beast awaking. I thought it a curse, a madness that would destroy my kingdom." He reached out, his fingers gently brushing a stray lock of hair from my cheek. The touch was electric, a silent confession. "But it was not a curse, Elara. It was a salvation. You have not just saved my kingdom, you have saved me."
He looked at me, his golden eyes no longer haunted, but clear and certain. "I do not offer you a crown out of duty. I offer you my heart, my loyalty, my everything, not as a king to his queen, but as a wolf to his mate. Will you stand with me, not just in this battle, but for all the days to come?" Tears welled in my eyes, but they were tears of joy, of a journey completed. The rejection, the betrayal, the fear, the cold of the dungeon, it had all led me here, to this moment, to this man. "I have always stood with you, Kaelen," I whispered. "From the moment you claimed me, I just didn't know it yet." He leaned forward, and for the first time his lips met mine. It was not a kiss of desperate passion, but of a profound, unbreakable bond, a vow sealed not with words, but with the silent understanding of two souls who had been lost and had found their way home in each other. The next morning, as the army assembled, something had changed. Kaelen stood before them, every inch the Alpha King, his power radiating. But beside him stood I, no longer in shadows, but in the light, my hand in his, and on my brow, woven from mountain flowers and a single sharp thorn by the village children, was a simple, defiant crown. It was not a crown of gold or jewels, it was a crown of the people, a crown of resilience, the true crown. Kaelen raised our joined hands, and a roar erupted from the army, a sound of such pure, ferocious loyalty that it shook the very mountains. The stolen bride was gone, the accused murderer was gone, the Shadow Queen had stepped into the dawn. Epilogue, 1 year later. The great hall of the obsidian fortress was filled with light and laughter, a sound that now echoed with genuine joy, not mocking celebration. Banners of the united packs hung from the walls. At the high table, Kaelen and I sat, not as captor and captive, but as king and queen, partners in every sense. The war had been swift and decisive once the southern packs rose. Isolde's glass alliance shattered. She was captured trying to flee through the very pass she had stolen. She now lived in exiled silence, her ambition her only companion. Ronan, broken by guilt, had chosen a life of penance as a border sentinel, seeking a redemption he might never find. The fortress was no longer a tomb. The west wing, the shrine of the Knight of Ashes, had been opened to the sky. A sapling, nurtured from the seeds of the old charred tree, now grew in its center, a symbol of life returning from ashes. Kaelen's wolf was no longer silent. It was a steady, powerful presence within him, no longer a beast of rage and grief, but of protection and profound loyalty. The curse was a story told by fearful minds. The truth was a wounded heart, healed by an unexpected love. As the feast wound down, Kaelen stood, raising a hand for silence. He looked at me, his eyes soft, the ice within them forever melted. A year ago, his voice resonated through the hall, this kingdom stood on a knife's edge. Betrayal festered within our walls, and a shadow of tyranny threatened our lands. Many of you looked upon your king and saw only ice. You looked upon my queen and saw only a stolen girl. He reached for my hand, lifting it with his. You were wrong. You saw a weakness where there was the greatest strength. This queen, with a heart that refused to break and a will tempered in shadow, did not just stand by me, she saved me. She saved us all. She did not take a crown, she earned it with her courage, her wisdom, and her unshakable faith in what this kingdom could be. He turned to me fully, his voice dropping, meant for me, though all heard. Elara, my mate, my queen, my heart, you are my greatest victory, my eternal peace. Tears of happiness streamed down my face, unashamed. I stood, facing him, our joined hands between us. And you, Kaelen, my voice strong and clear, you who saw worth in a rejected girl, who trusted me with your truth and your kingdom, you are my home, my strength, my always. He smiled then, a true, full smile that transformed his face, warming the entire hall. He leaned his forehead against mine, a gesture of pure, profound connection that spoke louder than any vow. Below us, the united packs of the realm erupted in cheers, not for a king alone, but for the king and queen who had forged a new era from the ashes of the old. The stolen bride had found her kingdom, the Ice King had found his heart, and together, under a crown woven of trust and wildflowers, they ruled not with fear, but with a love as enduring and unbreakable as the mountains themselves. The end.